welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. I'm Renee and I read a lot. And today we are going back to my roots and we are doing a get ready with me while I review a book. Actually 2 books, it's a duology. I'm not actually going anywhere, I'm not getting ready for anything, but I do need to record another video after this because I, spoiler alert, do have plans for Thanksgiving and they do impede on my ability to edit. So I wanted to record and edit today before I left because I want to make my schedule just as busy as possible. So I'm getting ready anyway. I figured you could get ready with me in the process. Also, if my eye looks red, it's not like pink eye or an infection, it's allergies because I'm a giant nerd and I get seasonal allergies every fall and every spring. It cannot be helped. Sorry, I moved you guys over here. It was better for everyone over in this way. Okay, anyway, it doesn't matter. And as always, everything that I use makeup-wise, I'll put in the description because I don't really have time to like mention it as I go. It's gonna interrupt my flow. My flow is the most important thing about this. Hello, hi, Mid Getting Ready Renee here. I forgot to mention, this is going to be spoiler-free for the Dance of Thieves duology, but based on the nature of this following on the heels of the Remnant Chronicles, I am going to spoil plot points of the Remnant Chronicles just because I have to, because that's where this one sets up. So if you don't want any spoilers of the Remnant Chronicles, don't watch this, but it will be Dance of Thieves spoiler-free if you don't plan on reading this first. Okay, see y'all later. Okay, so the Dance of Thieves duology by Mary E. Pearson. Genre. That's important. Fantasy, but like romantasy. I don't know if it would have much of a plot outside of romance. It does have plot and it has substance, but it's mainly driven by the romance, I would say. It's definitely YA. It doesn't branch into like NA at all. There's no spice. Spice is a -1, but that's okay. Not every book has to have spice, especially not every book has to have spice to be good, right? It's interesting. It's set in the same world as the Kiss of Deception, the Remnant Chronicles series, which I've talked about that I've read pretty recently. And I can't tell if it's supposed to be set in the future or in the past, but it kind of seems like it's set up to be, you know, like a typical, somewhat medieval fantasy setting. But it's really difficult to say. There's not really any time markers given except for that they live in a post-apocalyptic world. But this post-apocalyptic world has been set up kind of medievally, right? With the kings and the lords and they wear long dresses and whatever. So it's just difficult to put like a time frame on that. You know what I mean? But I really like the world that it's set in. The world itself is where I'll go first, since it's the same world as the Remnant Chronicles series. So it's a world I'm very familiar with because I just read the Remnant Chronicles. It essentially takes place on one continent, you know, and on this continent, there are a few kingdoms, major kingdoms, Morgan, Dalbreck, and Venda, which is where we spent the majority of the Remnant Chronicles. Now we find ourselves in one of the smaller kingdoms. And we've heard about this kingdom a little bit. It's the kingdom of Islandia, I think is how you would pronounce it. But it was really confusing for me at first because we're told, you know, they're going to the kingdom of Islandia. We're told that they're going to a certain part of this kingdom for a certain reason, which I'll get into when I get into plot. And it's Tor's Watch and Tellsmouth being the city. Tor's Watch is ruled by the Ballinger family, not to be confused with our girl Colleen, but a separate Ballinger family. And they believe that they are independent. So that was pretty confusing to me, even having read the Morgan Remnant Chronicles universe series, because I was like, wait, are they going to Islandia or are they going to Tor's Watch? Is Tor's Watch independent or are they part of it? The whole confusion comes from the fact that they believe that they are independent, but Islandia believes that they belong to them, right? Kind of, yeah, honestly, pretty realistic. But it almost entirely takes place there. I mean, you know, or in the woods surrounding there, or on the road to and from there. It doesn't explore as much of the continent as the Remnant Chronicles did. I do think the world building would honestly be pretty confusing if you haven't read the Remnant Chronicles first. And I actually think that about the entire book with all of the background stuff, because the book itself doesn't really go into a lot of the world building behind it, or like the religion or how the kingdoms are run or anything, but that's all answered in the Remnant Chronicles themselves. So I do think that that might be pretty confusing, but I think that the world building itself is honestly pretty decent. Like we have, you know, a lot of clues to their post-apocalyptic society and what happened beforehand. We have a lot of like interesting facets of their religion. It's a pretty well set up world. And I really like it. The politics of it are interesting. I liked the world building. It gave me a lot to think about and it made me interested. I was interested in the world building. I would give the world building probably like a 4 out of 5. Mary Pearson is even, I don't know if she's created full languages, but the characters do talk in other languages sometimes, which I always find so fascinating when authors go to those lengths for their world building. So that was honestly pretty cool. It is marketed, I guess. It's marketed, at least from what I've seen, as a, you know, a standalone. It could be read as a standalone. You don't have to read the Remnant Chronicles first. I personally am gonna disagree. I guess that's harsh. I guess to the right person, you could get away with reading this without having read the Remnant Chronicles. Dance of Thieves, in my opinion, does a lot of like winking and nodding at the reader for references for stuff that happened in past books. Can you not? Basta. Where was I? Oh yeah, a lot of winking and nodding, you know, for past references, right? Like, oh, we meet the Queen of Venda, and okay, to be fair, this is one of her toys, but, and she's looking at me really cute. Go. I'm gonna regret that. I already regret that. She never wants to play, so I feel bad taking it from her. But yeah, there's just a lot of references. There's just a lot of references made to where the world stands, because it does follow like 6 years after the Remnant Chronicles, right? It's not like so far after. It is in a new place with a new cast of characters. So it's not a direct sequel, but it follows so closely on the heels of those events. And the plot is directly linked to what happened in the Remnant Chronicles. Like, it's a new plot, but it wouldn't have happened without the Remnant Chronicles kind of thing. It's kind of part of the fallout. And they don't do a lot of... I read this so much. Now they're both doing it. And there's not a lot of explanation as to what had happened. Like she doesn't go back and recap and say, oh, the Queen of Venda who... whatever. Like, we don't get a lot of backwards explanation. You kind of had to be there, read that, remember that, to kind of pick up on what's going on politically in this book, plot-wise. Does that make sense? They just do a lot of like, oh, this guy and his wife and his kids, and you know them from the last series, but they don't really introduce them or explain their connection otherwise, which I think like a lot of books that are spin-offs that are marketed as like you can read them independently do a good job of that in the history or whatever, that 6 years ago they had a tumultuous start to the relationship when XYZ happened, or, you know, I don't want to spoil anything really in the Remnant Chronicles. I guess if you're not going to read it, whatever. I don't want to spoil anything anyway. I'm really trying hard to keep this spoiler free, but it's hard. But they don't do any of that. They don't go back over it. And I also think that that would be confusing if you had read the Remnant Chronicles when they came out, because they were released in like 2016 is when the last one was released. If you read like those books 7 years ago and came into Dance of Thieves now, I think you would be pretty confused and be like, who is that? Could I get a little bit of a recap, because I've forgotten all about these characters because it's been 7 years. Do you know what I mean? I just think it would be useful to have a bit of a recap on these characters, even though sometimes I find it annoying when I've just read the previous book to have to read like a little bit, sentence or two of a blurb, a paragraph about what had happened that I just read about. I think in a case like this, it's warranted. But I say that having read the Remnant Chronicles. So there's every chance in the world that if I hadn't read the Remnant Chronicles, I would have just skipped all this stuff, because it's like little Easter eggs for people who have read it, but maybe you just don't notice it if you've read the Remnant Chronicles first. Maybe in the Dance of Thieves duology, that would just be superfluous information that just kind of filters through your brain. Do you know what I mean? It's hard to say. It's impossible for me to say, actually. But a lot of people like Dance of Thieves who've never read the Remnant Chronicles, so I have to assume that that's the case. But regardless, it does follow on the Remnant Chronicles' heels. And I think that brings us to our plot, right? At the end of the Remnant Chronicles, we were left with Leah being the new Queen of Venda. She's married to Raph, the King of Dalbrek, and they're happily ruling their kingdoms. Everything's going great. She still has her loyal guard that the Kamazar had, the Rattan. These Rattan are a group of elite warriors whose whole purpose is to serve the queen in whatever capacity they can. But they're like the most elite warriors in the entire world, right? One of those warriors is Casimira. Casimira's got kind of a interesting backstory where she was a thief, a street urchin, living under the reign of the Casimir. She was really great at being a thief, so she was pulled out of poverty and now serves the queen in her Rattan. So she's very grateful to her, but she's got like a lot of associated trauma from being an orphan on the streets. I should want to use my bronzer. I use this one. I don't know if we're far enough into winter where I can get away with using my lighter bronzer, but here we are. But so she and two of her friends, who are also Raton, Ren and Sinave, are tasked with going to Tor's watch to investigate treaty disputes. But they're not actually there to investigate treaty disputes. They're actually there looking for somebody who is part of like the Commissar's traders who were living in Morgan at the time of the Remnant Chronicles books. Somebody who got away, who they believe is living in Tor's watch, and they're going there to find them. But their whole premise is that a lot of the Vendans, because Venda itself doesn't really have much arable farmland, these Vendans got relocated. Some of them got relocated near Tor's watch, and they're allegedly being treated badly, and that's why they're there, right? And so Casimira, or Kazi, I'm pretty sure it's Kazi, goes there with her friends and immediately gets taken by like human slave traders, which is just a wild start to the book. She gets caught alongside Jace Ballinger. Now, if we remember, the Ballingers are in charge of Tor's watch, and they believe that they have the right to rule, not the king of Islandia. Jace is the new Petri, or like head, mob boss, if you will, of the Ballinger family, because his dad has just died. So he has got a lot on his shoulders because he's taken over a pretty turbulent time period when rulers change, and he wants to make, good on his rule. He also gets taken by the human slave traders. And so that's kind of where the story picks up, with Jace and Kazi escaping and trying to make it back to Tor's watch to like continue with what they were trying to do. Like Jace be a good head of the family, Kazi find the traitor that they're looking for. And honestly, that's where like the beginning of my issues comes in, right? This book, hang on, I gotta figure out where I'm going next. This book is marketed, or at least has been marketed to me, as enemies to lovers. I disagree. I think that they are strangers to lovers, but there's nothing suggesting that they were ever at any point enemies. At most, it was a mild distaste. But I do think that that's a common problem I have, is enemies to lovers are rarely enemies before they're lovers. Because it's really hard, I think, to come back from actual, at their throats enemies to being in love and being the center of each other's worlds. Like, I think that that takes a lot of time and writing that maybe is a bit difficult. Setting up the whole thing where why they have a reason to hate each other, because that's the thing, they don't ever have a reason to hate each other. I think that this is more a case of the trope of forced proximity, where they don't want to be in the situation that they're in, they didn't ask for it, but they are forced to be together and get closer and work together to help each other out and escape. Not really enemies to lovers. Very much more forced proximity. There's also other tropes that appear in this book, like there's a bit of fake dating, there's a lot of found family, hurt, comfort. There's a big popular book talk trope in the second book, but I don't want to say which one it was because I'm not going to spoil it. But there's a lot of the really, really, really delicious tropes that I eat up. It's just not enemies to lovers. But there are enough of like the popular tropes that I do love that it works for me. And that forced proximity it's really good. It's really well done, forced proximity. I really liked it. And a lot of stuff happens in these books. Like, I was going over trying to figure out where the second book had started whenever I was writing it down in my book journal, because I was like, there's no way all of that happened in the second book, but it all did. There's so much just plot, I guess, that happens it was really, really, really impressive. Because sometimes I feel like romantasy books can kind of get caught in that trap where nothing actually happens. Like the plot and whatever the romance isn't really advancing. It's just kind of more scenes of the same. But this book did not have that problem. I was amazed. The pacing of it, incredible. I was blown away by how well the pacing was done. Like, I was constantly on the edge of my seat. I couldn't wait to pick it up. It's been so long since I wanted to pick up a book and was anxious to put it down. Like, oh, I've got to go do something else, but I don't want to because I want to keep reading and have to see what happens next. And that definitely, I had that with this duology. So, and both books are good. I think a duology is the perfect length for this series. I think there's usually a problem with standalones where they're not long enough, or the book itself is too long and there's no good break point, or the book itself is too long and it just feels like it drags. Sometimes I feel like longer books, maybe the middle books don't have as much substance. They don't have that same draw to them that the outer books, like the first and third or the first and fourth or whatever, will have. I think a duology was perfect. I thought that the whole pacing of the entire duology left me craving more. I think it was way better overall than the Remnant Chronicles books. The writing, obviously, it's the same author, is the same. It's beautiful. The way that she paints pictures and scenes is divine. Like, the writing style is, it's perfection. I have no notes on it. I think a lot of romanticy can be kind of cringe or not like well written, which, mind you, I have no problem with. I love myself a good cringe, not well written book. Sometimes I just want to turn my brain off and not think about anything. And if it's entertaining to me, I don't care. But this book does not read like that. This book reads like a well-written book. So I don't think you'll be disappointed with like the quality of the writing by any stretch of the imagination. It's very good, which was my whole note on the whole Remnant Chronicle, was that I love the writing. The plot was just thin. But here, I actually thought, for the most part, the plot made sense. I'll say this. I didn't have many plot holes. I had some characterization holes that kind of manifest, in my opinion, as plot holes, but I did not have many like genuine like, oh, hey, we talked about this and now it's happening different, or it's not happening at all, or we had something that would have solved this, blah, 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 whatever. You know what plot holes are. We did not have many, if any of them, that I can remember or recall. The one thing I will say, though, is there is like a bit of magic system, if you will. Like, the whole thing about the Remnant Chronicles and this book is that there are allegedly characters with somewhat magical powers. It's just like a really strong intuition. So I don't even know if you could call it magic, but it's supposed to be magic. It's supposed to be like a gift of sight kind of thing, but it's essentially intuition. We've never really gotten a good explanation of that magic system ever. So like, there is allegedly a bit of magic, but I could not in good conscience tell you what it is. And so, you know, if I've also kind of seen it being marketed a bit like in the magical fantasy realm. No, no, stop lying. And that is like a criticism that I do have of the Remnant Chronicles and this duology, where I'm like, I like when magical systems are explained. I like when I understand the rules of the magic system, so I can understand how clever the characters are when they fit inside of it, or the plot problems that happen, or even just because I'm a nosy bitch and I like to know what's going on. So this was a little bit lackluster in that regard, but I don't think it takes away too much of like from the book. I think it could have been added to by the addition of an explanation of the magic system, but I don't think it subtracts too much that we don't have it, if that makes sense. Would have been a plus, but since it doesn't really come into play that much in this book anyway, it's fine. Again, though, I've said this before. I'm probably not going to say it again because I don't know when I would read another one of her books. Her character's actions do not make sense to me. And I'll get into the characters now. Kazi is marketed, you know, as this very competent thief, Kaz from Six of Crows, anyone? Who has a really strong ability to think on her feet and get people to do what she wants, and like kind of a magical almost ability. That's funny that I'm saying that, using that word, but you know what I mean. Way to like get people to look the other way, sleight of hands kind of stuff. And she's supposed to be very smart, very capable, very, what is it called? Like very adaptable, I think maybe is the word. Quick on her feet kind of thing. She's stubborn. She's a little bit traumatized. She doesn't like wide open spaces. She is headstrong. She goes after her goals. She is very loyal to the people that she loves. And all of that is really positive. I really, really, really liked her character overall. I liked that she was very strong, but she was still flawed, and flawed in like very realistic ways. Like, you can be very driven to reach your goals and kind of get tunnel vision, or you can be kind of loyal almost to a fault, or you can be very good at sleight of hand and kind of miss what's happening right in front of your face kind of thing. And I really liked her description of trauma as well. I thought that that was really well done, and I thought that that was, I always really appreciate that kind of like representation or journey that characters go through in that way. I really like that. I have no problems with any of that. That was delicious. I really like that. I liked her characterization overall. Jace is pretty similar, honestly. He is also extremely loyal to his family, extremely driven in his goals and in wanting to lead his family and kind of avenge his father for the lack of respect shown to him as the ruler of Tours Watch from, you know, the rest of the world. He's driven at getting Tours Watch its independence and recognition, securing for them, you know, a much brighter future. He's supposed to be, this is where I'm going to say he's supposed to be. He's supposed to be really, really smart, ahead of the game. He is the head of this family, thrust into it, but this family's always had to stay on their toes. They've always had to have a million kids because somebody's always looking to murder them. And because of that, he is really supposed to be very hyper vigilant, hyper aware, not very trusting of outsiders, just of his family, which I love when, you know, you've got that really, like, the broody, mistrusting, family only and first kind of character is really, really interesting and well done. But I think he misses the mark when it comes to his mistrusting. Cleverness surrounding not letting other people in. Like, he is almost a little bit too trusting of outsiders because, and I struggle to even use this as a critique because he's young. He's like 19 and he's thrust into this new environment and he just might not be good yet at figuring out who he can and cannot trust. So it could be intentional, but it doesn't feel intentional. Like, I don't feel like we ever got that peek behind the curtain of like, oh yeah, he fucks up because he's young. It feels like we got, oh, he's so mistrusting that he won't trust Kazi or Ren or Cineve or whatever. But then when it comes down to it, he's kind of an idiot about it. The most mild spoiler alert of all time. Kazi and Jace eventually do get back to Tours Watch. And Kazi goes exploring, looking for the guy that she's supposed to find. Of course she does. Something happens, and at the end of the day, she gets caught exploring. I'm only saying this just to give an example as to why I think that these characters are marketed one way, but then in actuality, they're shown to be another. She gets caught sneaking around. His whole family catches her. And instead of thinking a queen's guard, one of her elite guard from one of the most powerful kingdoms on the continent, is sneaking around my house in the tunnels, in the dark places she's not supposed to be, that's suspicious and that's something that we should look out for as a family. They think, oh, it's our fault for not showing her around fully today when she wanted to go. And, you know, there's a lot of tension and build up to this scene when she gets caught where they're like, we can't get caught. They're going to find that so suspicious. And instead of showing how clever it is, if she comes up with an excuse or how mistrusting Jace is, but maybe he's, you know, developing feelings that make it hard for him to reconcile with this or whatever, we just get kind of the whole cop out of the family just being like, oh, our bad that we didn't show you around as much as you wanted to be shown around today, which is like, come on, like, you're supposed to be smart. You're supposed to be cunning. All of you. You could figure out an excuse. You could have come up with a reason. Jace and Kazi could have used the scene to delve deeper into their relationship or whatever, but it's a complete cop-out with, like, the family just, oh, our bad, we didn't show her around. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of thing where I'm like, and that's just one example out of many, where I'm like, we don't really get a good insight into why the characters are behaving this way, and the characterization that we got of these characters is weak as a result. Like, I don't buy into Kazi as this super smart, super accomplished thief who gets caught and then can't talk or lie her way out of it. I don't buy into Jace as this super mistrusting, can never be suspicious enough, I'm out to protect my family no matter what, and outsiders are the devil, who doesn't even question a highly trained outsider with motive for hurting his family on her actions. And maybe if it was written on page, can't talk like this. Maybe if it was written on page why they were doing the things that they were doing, I could buy into it a little bit more. But since we never got any insight into their decision making during this process, it just makes me scratch my head and be like, what are you guys doing? I can't talk while I put on mascara, so you're just gonna have to bear with me. Enjoy some royalty-free music while I speed this up. Finally starting to look like myself again now that I've got mascara on. other day, I completely forgot to close my eyes while I was putting on setting spray. And my eyes started watering like crazy because of course they did. And all my makeup melted off my face because I was crying so hard. And that rendered the setting spray useless. So moral of the story is always close your eyes when you put on setting spray, which does not feel like a moral I should have to say out loud, but never underestimate the stupidity of people. I forgot my lipstick too, but luckily it's just right over there. Oops. Luckily it's just right over there. BRB. I'm back. I also don't think I can talk while I put on lipstick. Is that too dark? Be honest with me. It's probably fine for fall, right? Don't we think? I don't really care enough to change it. I really want to... No, it's cute. It's cute, I decided. I'm just being dramatic. What else is new? A little bit of lip gloss to make it seem like I am hydrated. We are quasi finito. But overall, right, I loved these books. I could not get enough of them. I thought that they were fantastic. I had a few flaws with them, right? Like the fact that it's marketed enemies to lovers, but it's not. But I wouldn't say that's a flaw of the book. I would just say that's a flaw of how it's being sold to me. But that didn't affect my enjoyment of the book. I guess if you are desperate for an enemies to lovers read, then that would affect your enjoyment. Like, I think that's a trope that's an added bonus, not necessarily like what makes a book good or not, right? And, you know, I had issues with the characterization, but again, that didn't affect really my enjoyment of the book. Like, it was something that I like noted and kind of it took me out for a second. But then I was able to get right back into it and it didn't affect my desire to keep picking back up the book and reading. So overall, I was really impressed, especially because I was only like medium into the Remnant Chronicles. I found this to be so much better. And I actually really, really loved these books. And I'm so glad I have them in the hardcover. I'm so glad about that because they're going to sit on my shelf and be beautiful. And I can go back and reread them whenever I want. Not that I couldn't do that with any other format of book, but you know what I mean. They were absolutely fantastic. And I really would recommend them to people who are into young adult romantasy. Again, not much in the way of spice or new adult realm of book, but it didn't hinder my enjoyment at all. I guess if you hate YA, obviously don't pick these up. But I thought that they were really, really good. And I would highly recommend them. That's all my thoughts, which is great because I'm also done with my makeup. So if you've read these books, please let me know what you think. I don't know if you agree with me or if there's just like massive things that I've been missing. Maybe my reading comprehension is like a -1 and I've missed a bunch of important stuff in these books, but that's why I have you guys to keep me on track. So thank you so much for watching, truly. Please like the video if you liked it and subscribe if you want to see more. Let me know if you want to see more Get Ready With Me reviews or like long form reviews, or if you prefer the short ones that I do at the end of every week. That's what I'm filming next, but I obviously take that into account. But anyway, yeah, thank you again. Please like the video if you liked it and subscribe if you want to see more. And I'll catch y'all in the next one. Bye.